This is the day in which we can, connect with our old friends and our classmates and our mentors. We can spark new collaborations, and we can learn from experts from across and outside of our university. And with so much excitement on campus, and I know some of the challenges with getting communications out this week, we're just thrilled that those of you who are here have chosen to join us this morning. Look, our work today has never been more important. Exactly 1 year ago at Homecoming 2024, I stood in this very room at this very place and I announced our new strategic vision, Together for Good. This not only unites, but also uplifts every single learner and seeks to transform society for good. And a year later, I'm incredibly proud of the strides we have made as a community. So in the past year, we piloted our Pioneering AI in School Systems, or PAS, program for Philadelphia district leaders, principals, and teachers. And with a $1 million investment from Google announced last week, we're expanding to 5 additional districts across Pennsylvania, New Jersey, and Delaware. With partners, we have launched the Academy at Penn, providing 200 Philadelphia high schoolers with a summer institute and year-long academic, career, and social-emotional support, studying outcomes to inform a scalable model for student support nationwide. And in fact, you may hear some loud noises from the basement because many of these students are in our classrooms downstairs as we speak, learning from our fantastic staff and faculty in their Saturday programming. We recruited 2 new faculty leaders to join our exceptional faculty advancing AI, learning science, data, and design. And I'm delighted to tell you all for the very first time that we have the new USDAN Family Professorship in Special Education, which is Penn GSE's first professorship dedicated to special education, made possible by a generous commitment from our board member and Penn and GSE alumna, Andrea Pollack, and her husband, Adam USDAN. We're incredibly excited to be bringing this important faculty member to our school in the next couple of years to help inform districts across the country. And as we look ahead, I hope you'll continue to join us in making the shared vision that we committed to last year a reality. The very first priority we named in Together for Good is our commitment to preparing a highly skilled education workforce for preschool through post-secondary education, which encompasses preschool, K-12 teachers, university faculty, and school and university leaders. And this actually brings us to our panel today, Changing the Game, College Athletics, NIL, and University Budgets. So look, this is my 4th academic institution, my 4th school of education since becoming a professor. And I can tell you that when I think of a typical school of education, I don't think immediately about expertise in college athletics. However, as part of our commitment to preparing effective education leaders in a rapidly changing landscape, this expertise is critical for many higher education leaders. Indeed, for many colleges and universities, shaping strategic decisions and athletic programs is crucial to institutional health, and in many cases supports their ability to deliver on their mission to current and future students. Following the formal approval of nearly a $3 billion settlement in June 2025, and the most dramatic change to college athletics since at least 1972, when Title IX was passed into law, schools are now allowed to begin paying their athletes. This change invites pressing questions of equity, fairness, and financial impact, and the path forward is being charted in real time. So it's my pleasure to welcome Dr. Karen Weaver, a 2009 graduate of our own Executive Doctorate in Higher Education and Management program, an adjunct assistant professor here in higher education, and academic director of our Collegiate Athletic Certificate program. Dr. Weaver is a nationally recognized authority on the intersection of college athletics, higher education leadership, and public policy. She's also the host of Trustees and Presidents, a podcast for university leaders on college athletics, which is exactly what we'll be doing this morning, engaging leaders and experts in a deep conversation about navigating the rapidly evolving world of intercollegiate athletics. So please join me in welcoming Dr. Weaver and our esteemed panel for this conversation.
Good morning, everybody. My name is Dr. Karen Weaver. Yes, my voice sounds funny, and I'll tell you why. I had to have vocal cord surgery about 10 and a half weeks ago, so I'm in recovery, but this is part of my rehab. So think of me like an athlete who has to go out and practice. This is my practice, okay? So I'm going to go up and down, but I hope you'll bear with me. I'm thrilled to welcome my 2 guests, but first, let me set the stage for you. Good morning and welcome back for Homecoming at the University of Pennsylvania. I'm Karen Weaver. I'm a member of the graduate faculty here at Penn, and I'm delighted to welcome both my colleagues on the panel and all of you here today. My teaching and research concentrates on the intersection of higher education and college athletics. My focus is on guiding university leaders through this unprecedented time in college athletics, helping them to both understand and think through how these changes can and should fit with what their institution's mission is today, not as it was 20 years ago. We are going to try to answer 3 general topics. First, what the heck is going on in college athletics? Secondly, how are university leaders navigating this upside down world? And third, what's the impact it's having on athletes? We used to think of college athletics as an amateur enterprise. Those athletes came to campus as students first, everywhere, not just the Ivy League, in exchange for representing their college or university in the field, where they could receive an athletic scholarship that covered up to tuition, books, fees, room, and board. We thought a 4-year degree and the promise of a strong career trajectory was an even exchange. But as college athletics at the highest levels has turned into $1 billion a year enterprise, and some coaches are getting paid millions of dollars despite getting fired for going 0-3, yes. At the beginning of the football season, yes. Most fans know the playing field has shifted. And for sure, the athletes have noticed that the money is coming into everyone but them. This has had a profound impact not just on college athletics, but on high school athletics as well. As of today, over 30 states allow high school athletes to monetize their name, image, and likeness. A few are coming to college already as millionaires because of their high school talents. Think about that for a second. Let me use Caitlin Clark as an example. Remember her? Okay. So there are a few athletes who have transformed the college sports landscape like Caitlin did. Her senior year at Iowa, she earned, I kid you not, $22 million in NIL money. She supported local food banks and charities with her earnings, and the local high-need grocery chain created a cereal with her image on the box, with proceeds going to a local youth group. NIL has been used by athletes all over the country to impact their communities and alter the trajectory of many lives. So yes, we hear about the Bentleys and all that type of thing, but many, many athletes are doing things like this in their communities. And just for a quick perspective on this industry's impact since this June, the College Sports Commission has just reported this week that more than 12,000 total NIL deals are worth over $87.5 million have been cleared by the NCAA as legitimate deals for the college athletes that have filed them. Just think about that for a second. It's almost $100 million for those 12,000 athletes. My colleagues Jeff and Roger bring deep personal and professional insight to this topic. Jeff, as the president at Wagner College, a Division I, we would call him a mid-major, school with 21 or 22 flag footballs coming, yes. Has strong men's and women's basketball programs, but as a campus, not in a Power 4 conference. I think it's important to have that discussion. Roger, as the executive vice president and provost at the University of Maryland, Baltimore, is the parent of a basketball-playing daughter who has been navigating the world of the NIL and transfer portal with his family. Welcome to you both. Let's start with 2 basic questions. Jeff, how do you explain what NIL is to your faculty, staff, alumni, and others?
Thanks, Karen. Thanks, Karen. I'll make it work. Thank you all for being here. So I think that one of the things I try to remind faculty especially is everyone focuses on what you described, the Bentleys. And the pushback on that is, well, there's a lot of students who are doing great things with that money. Well, I actually try to get everyone away from the money. NIL has money at the end of the day. I totally get that, and it's important, and it drives a bunch of actions and decision making. But I think faculty all across the country need to spend more time focusing on what are the repercussions in the classroom and in the dorm rooms, right? And the reality is, and I'll put this in entirely non-sport world. For any of us who are dealing with someone who's, say, 14 to 21 or even 22 right now, they talk about their brand, their individual brand, TikTok, Instagram, whatever other social media world they do. Everything is about their brand. And if you just convert that thinking to what I have to do as an athlete, right? So if I need to get on TikTok and dance or know what I'm eating or whatever it's going to be to maintain my brand, and you convert that and you say, okay, I'm an athlete and my job is to make sure I get the most amount of reps, I get the most amount of shots, I score the most amount of points, I am whatever it is that's going to happen. And as a result of that, my hope is that my brand will improve and I will make more money, right? And we can't forget that, because that means that the goal of every student is to make more. If student athlete is to make more, whether they're making $8 and they want to make $2, or they're making $1 million and they want to make $3. And every institution that they start with has some level of inability to go above what they currently offer. And that means that that student is literally actively trying to use your institution to get to the next institution. We spend all our time focusing on whether they're making the money in the first place, but they're not paying attention that they're not in the classroom and they're not on that campus to be there for 4 years anymore. And at my institution, which is part of the Northeast Conference, which is an outstanding conference, but nobody in that conference is going to pay the quarterback $3 million. As a result, every quarterback in that conference is trying as best as they possibly can to have a good enough season to enter the portal and go to a school that's going to help them make a little bit more. And then a little bit more again, so I actually think it's wrong to start assuming that every student athlete is going to be there for 4 years. Now, at an institution like Wagner, where 40% of my student body is a Division I athlete, that's really scary, right? Some institutions, when you're roughly 10%, that's also scary. So to answer your question with that in the context, I would argue we all need to stop worrying about whether we have the resources for revenue share, or we've hired enough people in athletics to make sure that our students are filling out tax forms and whatever else they need to do, which, by the way, you have to do anyways, right? And we need to start realizing that the true impact on this for colleges mid-tier and below is your belief that you're going to maintain these students for 4 years is going to diminish enormously. That will affect your budgets. And for any institution, which is like almost 100% of them that are tuition dependent, that will have an impact. And so my message consistently is stop looking at the headlines, start looking at your enrollment and retention data. That is where the true impact on colleges is going to be hit.
Okay, Roger, you are an avid follower of college sports, a coach, AAU, and an excellent girl dad. Yes, briefly explain how much athletic recruiting in general has changed in this new era.
Thanks, Karen, and thank you all for being here. It has changed significantly. I'll talk first as an educator, because I am an educator and I'm an academic. And yes, we're speaking in general terms. We're talking about student athletes, and we might even be suggesting that the overwhelming majority of them are there just to make as much money as they can and transfer from school to school to school. That hasn't been my experience as a parent. Not every kid is chasing money. And as administrators, and as folks responsible for developing these young people when they come to our campuses, we need to remember that. I remember when Karen and I were in the same cohort here at Penn, anytime we talked policy issues in the classroom, in the cohort, especially when those conversations were led by Bob Zemsky, the chocolate people, it's an inside thing. he would remind us of the following. He would say, the higher education landscape, think about it when you're thinking about policy, like an elephant. Remember Karen said, an elephant is a large animal, mammal. There's the head of the elephant, and then there's the body of the elephant. And obviously the body is overwhelmingly the largest part of the elephant. And he would say, in higher education, most of the influential institutions are the head of the elephant. And when you're talking academic policy, finance policy, enrollment, things having to do with the education of students, they drove everything else that happened in the rest of the elephant. The same thing now is happening in athletics. Some of those same institutions who might not have been in the head because they're not the IBs or the public IBs or the elite privates. In the athletics context, they're in the head of the elephant. And they are driving everything else that's happening in the body of the elephant. And the majority of student athletes who find themselves in the body of the elephant don't have the resources, the NIL money, or institutions that could pay them the kind of money to drive Bentleys and have expensive watches and so on. A lot of those athletes are not going to go pro. And that, as the NCAA Act says, most athletes that will go pro is something else other than the sport they're playing in college. And so as academic administrators, we have a responsibility to prepare them for what's next. And I think that this focus on NIL and athletics and the Power Four is taking our attention away from that. And that's how it's changing significantly from my point of view as an educator. As a girl dad, I have two daughters. One daughter plays now Division I basketball. She's a senior, she's a redshirt junior, she was injured last year. And my youngest is a junior at a Division III volleyball program. And so I've helped them with my wife navigate their choices to college. And my oldest, there's a connection between the two of us here, Jeff, was at an NEC program up until last year, was not planning to transfer, and this bears directly on the conversation we're having there. Until after the season ended, her president sent out a message and said, we can't do this anymore, this Division I sports stuff, so we went from D1 to D3. So she was forced into the transfer portal. And that transfer portal experience is interesting, to say the least. Again, I said I'm an educator and always stressed to our daughters, athletics is a means to an end, right? Education, you guys enjoy playing sports, you get to do it in college, but in the end, you want to get a quality education and move on to what's next for you in terms of a career. And so when she went into the portal, her focus was on finding a school with good academic fit. Priority number one, she had no interest in money. That wasn't part of the conversation, but when she entered into these conversations with coaches, that's where they started. That's where they started. We sent transcripts in advance so they could evaluate them to see she didn't want to lose credit. She didn't want to lose a year. She wanted to graduate on time. And some schools just didn't even do an evaluation of a transcript by the time we got to the conversation. And I'm sitting there like a provost, like, when are we going to talk academics? And they're talking about how much Alston money they have, and NIL money, and NIL collectives, and what they could do to market a brand. And I'm like, all right. But it's just not the focus. And I struggled with that. But in preparing for this, I realized why I was struggling. I was still thinking about my daughter as a student athlete. Institutions these days are thinking of athletes as assets, right? And parents who have good kids with ability really need to start thinking about their kids as assets as well. They're not students anymore. And so there wasn't a meeting of the mind in what I was expecting for the conversation and the way they were approaching the conversation. And so the landscape has changed significantly, and it continues to change.
Yeah, both of you brought up some excellent points. Jeff, I want to dive a little deeper into what you said. 41% of your undergraduate full-time population is athletes. How do you think about this new world from the president's perspective, but also your administration and finance team managing this?
Yeah, so before I answer, I want to come back to something Roger just said, because I think it's really critical. If you imagine the sports world as a pyramid, right, the tippity top of the people who would go pro, right? That's what we always would hear. You know, I grew up, yeah, you're gonna play high school, maybe you're gonna be good enough to play college, but with all due respect, Jeff, you're not gonna be making pro. So you need to start thinking about something else, right? Now that that payday comes down into college, right, you're fundamentally altering what again, 14 to 18-year-old is thinking, what their families are thinking, right? And I know there's a question somewhere about how long one can do that, but that's fundamentally different. Now we're into high school, right? So I think Roger's exactly right. It's assets. I would describe it more as, what we used to think families would think if they really believed their child could go pro. Now it's, wow, I could really make something, or my child could really do some great things financially if they just go to college, right? Switching back to, as an institution such as mine, I think for us, I have to keep coming back to, there's a fundamental thing that doesn't change, which is there's a budget, right? We are businesses, above all else. We're in the business of higher ed, we're in the business of helping people prepare themselves for a better future. And that is both altruistic and it's financial. Now, we did not opt in to the House settlement, so we're not paying revenue share.
Let's just explain what that is for a second.
Yeah, so institutions had a choice coming out of the House settlement. Some institutions chose what's called opt-in, which means they've agreed that they will use some of their revenue to directly pay students. It's a cap of 26 million, which is defined by the average revenue of the upper institutions, right? So that would be laughable for me to think that I would be able to even come close to 26 million, right? But with that comes certain restrictions, right? You have smaller rosters, so some of your expenses may go down, so on and so forth. It's much more controlled, but the institution is the one paying. There still is NIL, but they're the ones paying it. Opting out means you do not pay your students directly from your revenue, right? We are an opt-out institution, although I acknowledge that, sometimes I wish that we were, not because we would have extra money to give, but because it just comes with more, it's easier to manage in my view. But in any case, it's still based on enrollments, right? We are still a tuition-dependent institution. We have to have a certain number of students to make our budgets work. The more we have to start thinking, and I use this term often, nobody likes it when I do it, but for some of our sports, not all, certainly basketball, men's and women, certainly football, lacrosse, I would argue baseball as well, we're running literally a junior college within a college. I don't have a lot of expectation that every football player I've brought in's goal is to go 4 years at our institution. I think that's sad. It's not what I want. It's not what I grew up with. But my responsibility is to adjust to the market. And the market is that my outside linebacker is going to attempt to move on if that person wants to go make some additional money. Because I've opted out. I know I can't provide that financially. So the likelihood that if they have a really good season, they'll move on, that's what it is. My basketball coach is pretty clear. Like, I may every year may have 10 to 13 new players, right, dressing on my basketball team every single year. And when you recognize that, right, we all would like to see a student come in and stay for 4 years. It's stable and it positively impacts our budget. We kind of have predictability. When you don't have that, that gets really strange and weird, right? But for us, we actually I'm trying to go the other way, which is to say, there are some institutions where if you come here and you actually play well, right, we've got the connections, right, to move up the sort of the food chain, right, and that makes sense, so we can continue enrollments. But everything is about the enrollment. It's not about whether I can give $1 million. I can't. That's easy. Let Ohio State and everyone else worry about that problem. by the way, they're not worried about that problem. Right? They're not worried about that problem. But I think that's how we have to approach it, and I think more administrators need to take that look. We have to get back to the basics of running the business. Right? We'll call them assets. For the moment, I'll just call them customers. Right? They're our customers. They are coming to us for a reason. Right? I would love, if you're like a McDonald's, right? I would love for them to come in because I have the Big Mac. That's a lunch and dinner. But McDonald's had to adjust to serve breakfast, right? And in our industry, we have to adjust now because that is where the market is. And nobody or no one single entity is going to stop that model until we reach the point of lunacy. And just in case anyone's wondering, we are nowhere near that in my view.
We're getting there. So let me ask you this, Jeff. Opting in means revenue share. Revenue share means the revenues that the athletic department generates. So that's ticket sales, media contracts, sponsorship dollars, donations, that type of thing. On many campuses like yours and others, they are also charging student fees that go directly to the athletes. Give us your thoughts on that.
So it's an easy answer for me because my athletic department, like the vast majority of athletic departments in America, don't turn a paper profit, right? So there's no real revenue by which to turn over. You've got to expand your horizon and the definitions to get there. But there are institutions where that kind of gets really close to the break-even line. And so there are some student groups across campus who feel like they are in essence using their dollars to pay student athletes. The counter argument to that is sure, but those students are affecting the brand, right? And for those of us that are in the Northeast and we're watching more and more students from the Northeast head to the South, right? I say all the time, return on investment was a great model to decide where you're going to go to school, but if you're going to Alabama or Ole Miss, you're not going there because Wall Street's there. You're going there because of the brand. Right, and so the argument against students shouldn't pay other students is, but those students that don't play football in Alabama are getting a pretty good return on a tiny investment for their own brand, as you see on TikTok all the time. So it is a back and forth. I think for an institution like ours, we're just more simple, right? My fee, my students could basically pay $1 and go to games if they want. It really doesn't make a difference.
Yeah, there's been some real pushback about it. The student doesn't care at all about athletics, having to still pay student fees for athletics. So that's a real legitimate issue. Roger, you mentioned the transfer portal. Explain to the audience what is the transfer portal and how your daughter navigated it.
So the transfer portal is the place you go if you decide that you're playing at one institution and you want to transfer to another institution. For a student who's not an athlete, all you do, you pick up your stuff, you pack up your room, you move out, and you go to the institution that you apply to that's willing to accept you. Athletes can't do that, and they can't do it whenever they're good and ready there. There's a window of time within which you could enter this virtual thing called the transfer portal. So if you're a student athlete in a Division I program and you want to leave your institution, you have to go to your compliance officer and say, I want to put my name in the transfer portal. And it happens pretty quickly once you make the decision. And once you're in the portal, other institutions and coaches at other institutions could begin to contact you. Because under current NCAA rules and regulations, if you're an athlete at Penn and you don't like being at Penn anymore, you can't just pick up the phone and call Maryland, which is what you should do. You have to wait until you get into the transfer portal. No Maryland coaches call you and say, hey, why are you on the bench? You're not having a good season. You should be starting. Come to Maryland. They can't reach out and have those conversations. Now, as an AAU coach, are there ways that I know colleges back channel the process and talk to the AAU coach or the football coach who talks to the kid and their parents to say, hey, if you ever go into transfer portal, you could find your way here. So, of course, people find ways to work around it. But if you're following the rules, that can't happen. So the kid puts their name in the transfer portal, and they hope that there is interest. And it's very stressful. Now, if you're an elite athlete, you go in and immediately, right? Kind of knows, immediately, you start getting folks calling you and say, hey, why don't you come here? You're gonna be a good fit here. If you're not an elite athlete, but you're good enough, you have interest, right? And people start calling you, what are you looking for? And you start having those conversations, and then you start taking visits to the institution, right? To see what might be a good fit. You want to think about why you're leaving your institution. Most kids looking to level up, maybe get some NIL money, more playing time, and what have you. And of course, what I worry about as an educator is that for a lot of these kids that go into the portal, it's just about where can I go, get playing time, get some NIL money, and not about, well, what about the academics, right? How many credits are transferring? After I run my 4 years of eligibility or what have you, will I actually graduate with a degree? And if I'm not going pro, that I could go do something with, right? And so, where is that conversation happening, and who's guiding them through the process as they're navigating the portal? The portal is simply set up to make you go from one team as an athlete to the next team, right? You would hope that along the way, academic advisors on the receiving teams are talking to you about academic fit and so on. But as I alluded to earlier, that wasn't necessarily my experience. They focused on getting athletes. And it's really super competitive now, as Jeff said, right? Because that receiving team might have lost 10 of their 15 players on a girls basketball roster. So they are actively looking for players. So they're just trying to get players and sign them as quickly as possible. And so that's the mechanism that the NCAA has set up to allow kids to transfer. And it's truly really stressful because there are kids that go in and don't come out, as they say, right? They think they're good enough, and they go in, they think they could level up, and they find out that they can't, and they're stuck. Because nowadays they could come out and return to the institution if the institution will have them back, right? Coaches also encourage kids to go into the portal. Jeff, we had enough for you. You might want to think about going into the portal, right? And so it is a challenge.
So we're going to take some questions from the audience.
You can sort of write them down, we'll come
Yes.
around and hand them in, and the panel will consider them, but you guys continue.
Okay, we'll continue. So I did want to point out something I thought was interesting. I get a lot of questions about where is Penn in all of this? Where is the Ivy League in all of this, right? So there's been a lot of concern that the Ivy League does not want to opt in to this revenue sharing. That's very clear. But this appeared yesterday in the Daily Pennsylvania. And if you want to go online, you could read it. It says, McCaffrey, that's Frank McCaffrey, the new Penn men's basketball coach at Penn, says Penn's men's basketball using NIL collective, encouraging alumni-driven internships for players. Okay? Now this is a different take on NIL. It still allows the athletes to leverage their alumni engagement with Penn alumni who want to help them enter the workforce with more connections, more experience, and with some NIL money. So I think if you're interested specifically, this is the first article that I've seen about this. Obviously, we have a tremendous tradition of men's basketball here at Penn, so it's worth checking out to see how it's being reported. It's also worth following. But I know that Penn alumni, I spoke a couple years ago to the Champions Club. They are trying to navigate this right now. It's a very uncertain future. We all know the value of a Penn education. It carries you not just 4 years, but 40 or longer. But with everything that Jeff and Roger have described here today, it is challenging for athletes to think, well, if I can't go to Penn and get NIL, then I better go somewhere, because there's a chance for life-changing money. And that's something that's really troublesome for this. both of you talked about this stress on the athletes. How have you noticed it, Jeff, on the stress on the faculty? Have they understood this?
I think that, I think in the broadest perspective, there's so many other stresses on faculty right now, and there's so many other changes that this is not where their attention is. But I'm going to use that same question and come to the athletic staff, because I think that's where you really start to see the stress. So Roger booted me off a team a couple minutes ago, so let's just play that out for a second if we could. If you're the coach, your job is to run a good program, make your students successful, and win. I would always argue it should be in that order, but that is not life. Sometimes it's the other way, right? But somewhere along the way, you've got to make your program successful and your students successful. If the definition of success has changed, it's not getting a 4-year degree, it's making money, right? Now you're an entirely different paradigm and an entirely different mission than the rest of the institution. That's problem number one, right? But the only way to make your program successful is so you attract the students and the potential dollars, even if it's just $1, and I can't stress this enough. For most of us, it's not $1 million, it's just $1. It's for the student to be able to say that somebody found value in them enough to give them a penny.
Yeah.
If you're the coach and you're sitting there saying, okay, I've got to run a successful program, and I've got to win, and I've got 2 players. One's named Roger and one's named Jeff. Neither one of them are the best, but they're good team players. And Jeff's probably a little better than Roger. And Roger's saying, well, I gotta do more. I gotta get more playing time so I go make more money. And the conversation then leads to giving Roger either the straight scoop or a little wink and nod to say, Roger, maybe this is time for you to move on. Now Roger's gone, because any player that hears from their coach, it's time for you to move on, you're moving on. And without any understanding, Jeff has actually decided with his family he's going to enter the portal. And now that coach has lost both of us. Yeah. Right? With no idea. And Roger's now sitting there like, what? The person I was competing against, I could have stayed and I didn't want it, but now I'm gone. The coach doesn't know what to do. The players don't know what to do, the other team. And that happens everywhere. And so I feel for a lot of these coaches, even at the highest level, because you're consistently guessing all the time. And you're trying to build relationships. These coaches used to go into families' living rooms, recruit someone for 4 years. Now they're trying to recruit somebody, and now they're trying to recruit someone again. Right? Rick Pitino, in the beginning of last season, stated, like, I am not going to go recruit 18-year-olds anymore. There's a known commodity for a player who's been in a program that I know and trust at some other institution for the last 2 or 3 years. That, to me, is a better way of judging. But that means that St. John's has now knocked itself out of the market of collecting, right, or recruiting younger players, and it's closed that door. So it is, for the faculty, they've got their own sets of problems, and those are enormous. But I think from the athletic side, it's super hard, right, to navigate this and be held accountable to a standard that I'm not sure can be met.
Just a quick word about the faculty, and I'll make the point with a quick story. Waterslow used to be the president at our sister institution, College Park, which of course, he moved literally from the ACC to the Big Ten, which is a story in and of itself. But he was the first person I heard say to his faculty, much to their chagrin, that college athletics is the front porch to the university. And that if Maryland wanted to move up in the academic rankings, it had to invest significantly into athletics, because it's about brand awareness. To the points that were made earlier about Alabama and the kids that from the north who are going south. They see these programs that are having success and conflate athletic success with academic quality, because these institutions are known to everybody. And because of Wallace Law's strategy, moving first from the ACC to the Big Ten, and really leaning in to promoting academics, College Park has gone up in academic ranking and become more selective. And so now the faculty are indirect beneficiaries of that because they have better kids in their classrooms. And so there is this tension between the true value of athletics, what it means to the institution, and what faculty think the institution should be focused on.
It's a great point because one sort of feeds into the other, and AAU designated institutions are almost exclusively in Division I, not all, but most exclusively. So they do chase each other. Okay, we have some great questions from the audience. Question: is it safe to assume most high school athletes who wish to play D1 will be seeking NIL deals? What do you think, Jeff?
No, the vast majority won't. I think that a subplot to all of this is that high school athletes are actually a lot smarter than when I was a high school athlete, right? And they're pretty savvy and they know what's going on. Again, if you're a football player and a basketball player, maybe. But if you're a swimmer, I don't think anyone is sitting there saying, I'm going to follow the money and I'm going to jump from school to school. So you've got, like, a great word from Bob Zemsky, segmentation. You've got segmentation between, the Power Four and the rest, and then you've got a segmentation within sports. I think most students in high school that want to go to college and participate in your fencing and your swimming and track and field and things like that, they're more worried and they're asking questions about whether your school is going to keep those, right? Because the cost of running these bigger programs and revenue share and everything like that comes down, right, the path and starts to impact those Olympic sports. So no, I think the vast majority of college athletes at Division I level aren't chasing it. Does that mean they're not interested? No, they would love to. So they're more, like most of our students are thinking about brand and social media and kind of restaurant support them and things like that at the local level. But they're not chasing the huge number.
Let me just say this real quickly, because this is a reality check for parents. And this is coming from my perspective as a AU coach. So the question was whether or not high school kids are thinking about NIL money when I would suggest, because of what I just talked about, the transfer portal, that they should be thinking about whether or not they will even end up on a D1 roster. It is a whole lot more difficult, especially for basketball and football coming out of high school. You better be really, really good, because kids could transfer so easily now and go into the portal. College coaches will say to you, whereas they used to look to high schools to recruit kids, they first go into the portal because those kids have playing experience, they have film, they know how they've already seen, they know how to practice at the college level. So recruiting high school athletes at the Division I level is not a priority for a lot of coaches anymore, unless you are nationally ranked ESPN 3, 4, 5-star athlete.
That's exactly right. And I think that I have a question here about high school athletes and how do they get seen? And oftentimes it's late because the transfer portal has taken away or the athletes have entered. So this whole business of how kids are recruited is really starting to change, particularly in football and men's and women's basketball. Great question here about Title IX. How does all of this impact Title IX? Have you heard us say once anything about Title IX? Jeff, how do you think about this in terms of that?
It's not in the lexicon.
It isn't.
It's not going to be. I mean, this is where the booze will start. Title IX was a federal effort to hold institutions accountable. Okay. Revenue share, maybe there's a chance to figure out how to keep balance, but NIL is not. NIL is outside money, right? And there's no way to regulate that. You can't say to the Ford dealership, right, you're going to give $1 million to recruit this basketball player and I need you to do another $1 million to the women's team. You can't do it because you're not supposed to be in the middle of that conversation in the first place. And the more that you, I believe, the more that you move your revenue money around, if you're an institution that can do that, you're still going to have the outside influence coming in. So, and that's just step one. And then you've got the whole conversation, whether it's right or wrong, that goes on, say, like U.S. women's soccer, right? About how many people are going to buy tickets and what's the revenue of those leagues versus men's leagues and all the rest. I'm a huge proponent for Title IX. I feel it's incredibly important. It's opened a lot of doors. But I think that revenue sharing and NIL is going to break that apart a little bit first. And for those of you in the room that don't know, like I'm actually a big believer that this will eventually get better. It will eventually calm itself down and we'll find a new normal. But things have to get worse before they get better. And I would argue Title IX is one of those areas where you're going to feel it will get much worse first before we start to find a new balance.
I think I want to add to what you're just saying, just to help you understand. If your job as an athletic department is to try to focus on your football and your men's and women's basketball teams, because of the way the NCAA and media companies are set up, you have the best possibility of generating revenues from their sport, those sports. If you're focused on generating revenues so you can support the rest of your athletic department's activities, including having fencing and golf and field hockey, then you want those top sports to do well because they'll get more exposure and have more chance to win championships. That's been the logic in trying to assign NIL and revenue share to football and men's basketball. Because if we don't do well in those sports, there's no money to be had in the postseason. So that's the challenge here. And these schools are actually weighing their legal responsibilities in awarding 80 to 85% of the revenues to football, 5 to 10% to men's basketball, and the remaining 5% to women's basketball and everybody else. And inherently, that is in total opposition of what Title IX has said, because it's supposed to be an equitable opportunity. But the judge in this House case deliberately stepped away from defining how revenue share, whether it should be equitable between genders. So we have another lawsuit or 2 or 10 coming about that.
That is, of course, coming from the expert, all accurate. The Office of Civil Rights, the Department of Education, just put out a fact sheet on Title IX, especially as it relates to NIL. And in short, they've said they consider NIL money. Now there are 2 versions of NIL money. The one that an athlete could do through third parties on their own, and what they call NIL, university-controlled NIL, where I have a star athlete, the same guy I just kicked off my team is now a star athlete, and I decided I could help him market his brand that would bring money into him and to the university. They consider that financial assistance and a benefit, and to the extent you're doing that for Jeff, you better be also thinking about ways to, and players on the basketball team, you need to be thinking about ways you should be doing that for other athletes on those non-revenue generating team as well. And the fact sheet goes into some of this. And it's pretty interesting, and they have said explicitly, they punted on the question of third-party NIL arrangements, saying we're going to have to deal with that on a case-by-case basis.
It's really complex, and when you're trying to be competitive within your conference, if one school decides to heavily weight men's basketball, then how do the rest of the schools in the conference deal with that? So sometimes they collectively agree, okay, we're going to focus on this sport as a conference. And that certainly happened in the Atlantic 10, which has a lot of schools in the Philadelphia area. This is a very interesting question, so I'm going to ask you both, since you're both academics and you both have Provost in your title. What's being developed in terms of scaffolding credentials for these traveling students, like micro-credentials, certificates, associate's degrees, etc.?
It's a great question, because, again, we have to make sure that the student part of the athlete, this still student athlete, is being nourished as well. And it used to be, of course, before you had the ability to take online classes and hybrid classes, that students literally missed classes when they were on the road, right? So my daughter's team just came back from Florida. They were on the road for 2 days. She was still able to keep up with her classwork, right? Because the academic advisor had the good sense to register most of the team in hybrid courses for the season, so they should do the work. So to the question, institutions, if they are committed to making sure that the students are keeping up with the academics, have a lot of tools at their disposal. Micro-credentials, hybrid courses, online courses, Blackboard, Canvas, all of it to make sure that students stay on track with their schoolwork. So it's not as it used to be, like you're on the road, you miss classes, the professor is standing up at the podium and you're missing out and you have to say to somebody, take notes for me, because depending on who the faculty member is, they may or may not be willing to share their notes. That has all, technology has really made a big difference there, and students can now afford to keep up. But you need those athletic programs, one, to have advisors traveling with the players to make sure that they're staying on top of their work. That just like you're carving out time for film when you're on the road, you should be carving out time for study hall. So it really depends on the institution and the kind of academic culture that they're curating for their students.
Just very quickly, I would say, if you're going to do that for the students, be prepared to do it for all your students, right? Because you're not, I'm 40%. Like, I could do that big enough, but you're 10%. You're not going to run an entirely different system for just 10%. So be prepared to do it for everybody, and then once you start doing it for everybody, you're almost inviting more of your student body to transfer around to other schools as they move through the ranks. I could envision a situation where I say, well, I could take engineering 101 at a school where I'm not going to pay a lot of money, and now I've got that micro-credential, and now I can take it to another school where I can keep moving up and maybe get more expensive by my senior year, but I'm actually branding my way up to a better institution. So I don't think there's anything wrong with it, but I don't think this is one of those things you can break apart just for athletes.
A good question about financial planning for athletes, whether they're getting $10 or $100,000. I know the NCAA requires Division I schools to have some sort of financial understanding with the athletes. What do you do at Wagner?
So if there's a soapbox around here somewhere, I'm going to get on it for 60 seconds here. One of the things that drives me absolutely crazy about college, not just athletics, is just college in general. We spend so much time helping students figure out how to make a resume, how to do an interview, right? How to put on a tie, right? All the rest of that stuff. And none of us are doing enough to actually help them know how to negotiate their own salary. Right? Like, we get them all the way to the finish line, so to speak, and then we don't actually help them get beyond that. And so at Wagner, we're building a system where we're doing that for everybody, not just the athletes. Because I think you have to, like, there's a generational gap here that exists. We don't do checkbooks, so we seem to have forgotten how to help everybody balance a checking account. The idea that we would only do that for student athletes because they may make $10 from the local Dunkin' Donuts and not do it for the rest of the students doesn't make any sense to me. And I would say one of these things that we've successfully done is we've segmented our own student body. We're going to do certain things over here for this group and this group and this group. We're more universal. Everyone should have that basic understanding.
Okay, I'm going to ask you both one last question here, because we do need to wrap it up. Each of us are graduates of Penn GSE's highly regarded executive doctorate program in higher education management. How did this content perspective of this program prepare you to lead your campuses in this time of great upheaval?
It is an outstanding program. It is always ranked 1, 2, where are we these days? Very high. Very high. But the deal is going to get us to number 1. And I benefited from the program. There were 23 of us in the program. People like Karen, into athletics, finance people. At that time, I was from a student affairs background before I transitioned to the academic side of the house. And there were people from different types of institutions. At that time, I was in a private, residential, high tuition dependent institution in New York, and there were people from community colleges and R1 institutions and Power 5 institutions, bringing a range of different perspectives to any topic we were discussing. So one of the real values in the program was that I thought prepared me well is I really had understood higher education from different perspectives. And so I would think about the issue of the mental health issue, which was the focus of my dissertation, from where I sat. But then when I spoke to my colleague who was at a community college, there was a whole other dimension of it that I wouldn't even think about. So when I engage in these conversations now, I happen to sit as provost of one of 12 institutions in the university system, and every month there's a provost council that meet. And in the system, we have R1 institutions, regional institutions, D3 institutions, and when we talk about the issues, each provost is talking from the perspective of their institution, and I'm able to relate because I had that experience in the program.
I would say two things. One is the network. It doesn't end when you graduate, right? I mean, we're all facing some sort of existential threat right now, and the ability to get on the phone and talk to somebody who, not whether graduated in my cohort or some other cohort, the experiences they've had, the people they know, the networks that they have, the opportunity to just sort of scream at the moon, right? Or sit down with someone and say, what are we really seeing? And to then be a resource to folks is actually still another great opportunity, right? Because you're constantly giving back and forth. That's one. So I totally agree with Roger. I think the second thing is intellectual curiosity is something that's missing in everyday life across this country. To be in this program, you not only have to have it, you need to hone it. You can't walk into a conversation in that classroom and not have a pretty good knowledge of something that you may not be expert on, right? So I didn't teach a class, I'm not an academic, right? But I've had to learn how to run academics. I've never been an athletic director, but I need how to do that. I'm not a CIO, but I need how to do that. And I think the program teaches you how to dig in and train yourself to learn. Because you have to know it, you don't have to know everything, but you have to know more. And we all walk into these jobs realizing how little we know, right? And to be able to have that network and then also train yourself to learn is critically important. And I don't think we do that enough. And so that's why I think the Penn program was the greatest experience I had academically for that reason.
I agree. I'm one of the very few people to go through the program who had an athletics background. I came to learn about why higher education is the way it is. And I learned so much from my colleagues. I learned so much from my students, because I now teach in the program. And I think this is a critical moment for college athletics and higher education to be together. Because today we've talked about the splintering of these two factions away from each other. We have to find a way to bring them back together in a shared mission. I want to thank my panelists today. I want to thank you as the audience for great questions and your wonderful attentiveness. Thank you for coming.